وَكَفَى بِاللَّهِ حَسِيبًا مَا كَانَ مُحَمَّدٌ أَبَا أَحَدٍ مِّن رِّجَالِكُمْ وَلَٰكِن رَّسُولَ اللَّهِ وَخَاتَمَ النَّبِيِّينَ وَكَانَ اللَّهُ بِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ عَلِيمًا.
الله أكبر الله أكبر.
Egypt, the home of outstanding Qur'an recitation and the preservation of the Quranic sciences of tajweed, tartil, and tahfiz. From this constellation of brilliant voices and exceptionally rare talent, and a treasure trove of unique reciters. With legendary voices such as that of Sheikh Muhammad Rifat, or the golden melodies of Sheikh Mustafa Ismail, and the timeless wonder that is Sheikh Mahmoud Khalil al-Husari. Egypt was also the home and birthplace of the renowned Sheikh and Qari, Muhammad Siddiq al-Minshawi. Each reciter had his very own unique talents and commanded the admiration and respect of millions of believing souls. They are dear to even the coldest of hearts and respected by the most eloquent and enlightened minds. Indeed, they are loved and imitated by the very young to the very old in equal measures. Even within a galaxy of heavenly lamps, there must always be the pacing light of one unique star. In fact, to most Egyptians, and arguably for most in the Muslim world at large, that star had an undeniably beautiful and unique voice, one that would become so iconic and so universally accepted that it came to be known as the voice of Mecca, a voice that is familiar to listeners from Libya all the way to London. It is imitated from New York to New Delhi, and it is revered and held in high regard from the enlightened city of Al-Medina to the blessed sanctuary of Al-Quds in Palestine. More than any other reciter of his generation, and certainly above all others since his era, Sheikh Abdul Basit Muhammad Abdul Samad has come to be regarded as not only the most famous Qari in the world, but as one of the most inspirational and unique champions of the sacred discipline. Qari Abdul Basit Muhammad Abdul Samad was born in 1927. He came from a scholarly family who resided in the small village of Armand, which is situated near the eternal spring that is commonly known as the River Nile. His father was of Kurdish descent, and his mother was an Egyptian Arab. Even during his tender childhood years, the great Qari had an intense love and an intense attachment to the Holy Qur'an. As he later recalls, he would travel over 3 kilometers daily in order to get to a neighboring village where he could sit in a local coffee house and concentrate deeply as he listened to the radio. He would listen when they began the day's broadcast of the Qur'an recitation that was being read by some of the greatest and most celebrated Qur'an reciters of the day. He would be enthusiastic and inspired as he absorbed the melodious, rich and rhythmic recitation of Sheikh Muhammad Rifat, with the hope and ambition of one day following in his hero's footsteps. But the elder brothers of the young Abdul Basit had by now already expressed their fervent desire to pursue studies in the scholarly tradition of their forefathers at the prestigious University of Al-Azhar in Egypt. But unlike his elder brothers, the young Abdul Basit would express his desire to memorize the entire Qur'an by heart and to one day achieve his dream of becoming a Qari, a devoted disciple and dedicated reciter of the Holy Qur'an.
أنا طبعا يعني كنت محب للقرآن جدا.
The young Abdul Basit had his father's full approval and support. In actual fact, it was under his father's caring and loving presence that the 10-year-old came to memorize the entire Qur'an by heart, word for word, from cover to cover.
وحفظت القرآن وأنا في سن 10 سنين تقريبا.
The following year, his father took him to the village of Asfoon, where he enrolled him into a Quranic school, in which the young Abdul Basit excelled and eventually received certification upon having mastered the 7 recitations, and a short while later he also mastered the 10 authoritative recitations of the Holy Qur'an, under the expert tutelage of his mentor, Sheikh Muhammad Salim.
بعد ما فرغ الشيخ عبد الباسط واخذ الشهاده شهاده القراءات ال7 او القراءات ال10، اصبح الشيخ عبد الباسط في صعيد مصر كلها على مستوى محافظه قنا في البدايه تعرف من هو الشيخ عبد الباسط عبد الصمد.
It was not long after this that his teacher would permit his young protege to accompany him. He would go with him whenever he attended religious ceremonies and gatherings in which the Holy Qur'an would be rehearsed publicly. Yet despite his tender age and his lack of experience, at the early age of 14, Sheikh Abdul Basit was encouraged by his mentor to participate in these public rehearsals. It was in these early days that the unusual talent and unique gift of Qari Abdul Basit began to be noticed. It was not until 1950, during the religious celebrations in Cairo, that events suddenly took a fateful turn for the young and upcoming Qari. During these very special functions and gatherings, the audience would listen to the greatest and most seasoned performers of the day, many of whom traveled into Cairo from the famous village of Tanta, a place that is renowned to this very day for the exceptional Qur'an reciters and scholars that come from there. At only 23 years of age, and somewhat unknown in the larger cities such as Cairo, the young hopeful was intimidated and reluctant to attend the ceremony. However, with the encouragement of his senior companions and with the approval of his mentor, he eventually accompanied them to Cairo. It was to be a day that would mark history in Egypt, a bright new day in which the voice of Qari Abdul Basit Abdul Samad would penetrate the very heart and soul of Egypt. Qari Abdul Basit Abdul Samad was mostly anxious and relatively discreet in the overwhelming presence of senior practitioners and authoritative personalities that were present at the gathering. The Imam of Lady Zainab's Masjid, Sheikh Ali Subay, had noticed the presence of this young man sitting among some of the greatest reciters and most famous memorizers of the glorious Qur'an. Yet somehow, unsuspectedly, the young Qari would be summoned to recite for a duration of only 10 minutes as a short opening rehearsal while the audience is warmed up for the main performance to commence. Gracefully, the young Qari began with the name of Allah and proceeded to recite some verses from the Holy Qur'an.
أيها المستمعون الكرام، الشيخ عبد الباسط محمد عبد الصمد يتلو علينا من آيات الله البينات.
أفلا ينظرون إلى الإبل كيف خلقت وإلى السماء كيف رفعت وإلى الجبال كيف نصبت وإلى الأرض كيف سطحت فذكر إنما أنت مذكر لست عليهم بمسيطر.
This was to be a defining moment, a golden moment that would propel him into the center of a universe that had previously been exclusively for the senior Qur'an reciters and devotees of the day. But now, at only 23 years of age, Qari Abdul Basit Muhammad Abdul Samad had captivated the heart of Cairo and totally mesmerized his audiences. His 10-minute rehearsal eventually lasted for an entire hour and a half, owing to the insatiable and overwhelming request from the audience. Qari Abdul Basit Abdul Samad was an extraordinarily gifted talent, who despite his young age still attracted a great deal of attention and yielded a significant degree of respect. Allah had endowed him with a beautiful voice and the ability to convey a deep and meaningful understanding of the scripture through his melodious and heartfelt recitations. A year following his participation in the religious ceremony at the Grand Mosque of Lady Zainab in Cairo, the young Abdul Basit would enroll himself into a very challenging and exceptionally selective audio edition, which was broadcast on one of the main radio stations in the country. Sitting on the board of senior assessors was the notable scholar and critic Sheikh Ad-Dabah, who had initially encouraged the young talent to enroll for the audition. Other adjudicators included the knowledgeable scholar Sheikh Muhammad Shaltut, as well as the respected and renowned Qur'an reciter Sheikh Mahmoud Ali al-Banna. But by the grace of Allah, the young Qari had surpassed all expectations. He did not fail to impress his assessors by successfully passing the examination at the first attempt. From that moment onward, his voice was broadcast across the airwaves at 8 o'clock every Saturday evening. Soon, the inhabitants of his village in Armand would begin to gather around a small radio in order to listen to their beloved son as he embellished the airwaves with his ornamental and exquisitely beautiful recitation of the glorious Qur'an.
فعلا أراد الله والتحقت بالإذاعة في سنة 51 وبدأت الشهرة تبدأ من 51. كان يمكن عندي تقريبا 19 سنة أو 20 سنة، حتى كنت مقيم في فندق من الفنادق بجوار السيدة زينب رضي الله عنها، لأن كانت السيدة زينب هي بداية يعني شهرتي. ثم انتقلت إلى شقة بجوار في مواجهة المسجد مباشرة برضه، وأول تسجيلات سجلتها في جدة في إذاعة المملكة العربية السعودية.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
In 1952, Qari Abdul Basit Abdul Samad became the official reciter at the Grand Masjid of Imam al-Shafi'i, and in 1985, he also became the official reciter at the Grand Masjid of Imam Hussein, thereby succeeding the late and great Sheikh Mahmoud Ali al-Banna.
استقريت في القاهرة، ومنها بقى يعني بدأت الدعوات تقبل علينا من البلاد العربية والبلاد الإسلامية.
During his lifetime, he was granted the honorific title of As-Sawt Mecca, the voice of Mecca, having enjoyed the rare privilege and honor of reciting the glorious Qur'an from Islam's holiest mosque and sanctuary, Al-Masjid Al-Haram, located in modern-day Saudi Arabia. He also had the distinction of reciting before thousands of believers from all over the world in Islam's second most holy mosque, Masjid Al-Nabawi, in the enlightened city of Al-Madinah.
سافرت إلى دمشق سوريا، أحييت رمضان في المسجد الأموي الكبير هناك، وتنقلت بين حلب واللاذقية وحما وطرطوس وبني ياسف، العواصم الكبيرة. ثم دعيت في بيروت، وحصلت على أوسمة وناشين من سوريا ومن لبنان. ثم دعيت بعد ذلك إلى الأردن، وأحييت رمضانين بالمسجد الأقصى قبل الاستيلاء عليه.
سبحان الذي أسرى بعبده ليلا من المسجد الحرام إلى المسجد الأقصى.
Qari Abdul Basit Abdul Samad also founded the National Union for Reciters and was subsequently elected by unanimous consensus to champion the initiative by becoming the first president and chairman of the newly formed organization. Qari Abdul Basit also went on to become the very first reciter to win 3 consecutive titles at the World Qur'an Recitation Championships during the 1970s.
على مستوى العالم كله شرقا وغربا كل بلد في العالم قرأ فيها. أمريكا الشمالية، أمريكا الجنوبية، كندا، فرنسا، بريطانيا، ألمانيا، إيطاليا، ما خلاش بلد في العالم ما قرأ فيها.
Yet despite his overwhelming fame and astounding achievements, the Sheikh maintained a very pleasant and kind disposition. Some of his closest friends and companions would often recount the instances when the Sheikh would return home after his long international travels, oftentimes to be greeted by long lines of people who would come to him asking help and assistance. Yet he would always assist them and would listen to their concerns, and he would often grant them large sums of money from his own personal earnings. But the Sheikh would refrain from requesting any financial compensation for his recitation of the Qur'an. We have some rare insights and intimate pointers into the character and life of the late Sheikh Abdul Basit of the Samad. In an article published in 1966 by an English lecturer at the University of Azhar in Egypt, in the publication the late Sheikh is described as being a very simple, soft-hearted man. He never forgot his friends, however rich or poor they may be. When sitting in his chauffeur-driven limousine, he loved to sit next to his driver, whom he affectionately called Akh Masood, Brother Masood. As a result of his heartfelt recitation and his deeply rooted love of the scripture, it is reported that many people had embraced the faith after having listened and internalized the recitation of Sheikh Abdul Basit Abdul Samad. In fact, during an interview broadcast on national television, the Sheikh recounts an incident that took place while he was accompanying the Egyptian president Gamal Abdel Nasser, who at the time had an audience with some Russian dignitaries and senior ranking officers. The Sheikh recalls that after having recited the Holy Qur'an, he had witnessed a significant number of Russian officers who were moved to tears, despite not having understood the Quranic Arabic that was being recited before them.
الشيخ رحمه الله رحمة واسعة كان يقرأ القرآن بقلبه، نحس ذلك لو أننا استمعنا إليه، فإذا صور لنا الجنة نجد الصوت مبتهجا فرحا كأنه دخل الجنة ورأى ما فيها من النعيم فسعد بذلك وأراد أن يشرك الناس في هذه السعادة.
However, towards the latter part of the 20th century, the great Sheikh Abdul Basit Abdul Samad would spend his final days on this earth. He passed away on Wednesday, November the 30th, 1988. And his passing away was mourned by dignitaries, patrons of the art, ordinary men, women, and children from all walks of life, across the Muslim world and beyond. Yet even after his death, his beautiful voice continues to touch the hearts and continues to penetrate the souls of his audiences. His awesome recitation continues to live in the collective Muslim hearts and minds. His life story is an outstanding inspiration for subsequent generations of Qur'an students, listeners, and reciters from across the world. By the divine grace of Allah, Qari Abdul Basit Muhammad Abdul Samad spent a vast portion of his life teaching the words of the glorious Qur'an and transmitting its beautiful and rhythmic verses to audiences around the world.
Bum.